All right, guys, I'm a little annoyed because I've been trying to record this same clip like 7 times and I keep getting interrupted. So, whatever. Welcome back. Okay, episode 6.5 of Who the Fuck Decided to Incarcerate Bolanos. Okay, so keeping in mind that the umbrella for episode 6 are crutches. Why am I calling them crutches? I'm calling them crutches because these were direct benefits that were given to the prosecution during trial. Over the objection of the defense, the prosecution was given benefits. Straight up, they were given aid. They were given help, which are crutches. They were allowed to do things that should not have been allowed to be done based on reasonable, logical, and legal objections that were overruled by the defense. So our objections were overruled, essentially. Okay, so we're calling them crutches. So who are we talking about? We are going to be talking about Detective Sarah Markle. Who is Detective Sarah Markle? Detective Sarah Markle was the lady who did the cell phone forensics analysis, cell phone dumps, basically, of Michael Jackson Bolanos' cell phones. So, what is the clip that I'm going to be showing you guys and why is it important? What I'm going to be showing you guys is a clip of the prosecutor, Ryan Elsey, attempting to elicit from Sarah Markle a certain date from a Detroit News article. And he attempts to elicit that date from her by refreshing her recollection. And what is really going on here? So, Jeffrey Herbsman was put into police custody for 72 hours and then he was released. He was cleared after they investigated him, which, okay, we know they didn't actually investigate him, but all right, whatever. That's what they were saying. And after that, there was a article that came out in the Detroit News where they never named Jeffrey Herbsman, but they simply said that a person of interest was cleared from police custody or whatever, and he was released. So Ryan Elsey is attempting to get Sarah Markle to tell him the date that information was known publicly. And it's very clear that Sarah Markle has never seen this Detroit News article before, so Ryan Elsey tries to show it to her and be like, let me refresh your recollection. When your memory is refreshed, just tell me what the date is. And she tells him the date. Okay, that's fucking ridiculous because that's not how refreshing recollection works. That's improper use of refreshing recollection. Why is that so? Let's talk about that very quickly. In order to refresh someone's recollection, the memory has to already be in their head. They have to have experienced something in order to refresh the memory of said thing. So if Sarah Markle has never seen this Detroit News article before and Ryan Elsey hands it to her in an attempt to refresh her recollection, you're not refreshing a memory that she's ever had because she never fucking saw the article prior to right the fuck now on the stand. So she's not re-remembering it and you're not refreshing her memory of it by showing it to her. What are you doing? You're feeding her the fucking answer. You're just giving her the answer that you want her to say. That is improper use of refreshing a recollection. Okay? So an analogy to that would be if I am asking you, do you remember that time that we went to Cedar Point back in 1992? And you're like, no, I don't remember. And then I show you a photograph of us in Cedar Point in 1992. And you're like, oh shit, wow, yeah, I remember that now. You've refreshed my recollection successfully. Good job, right? On the other hand, if you have never been to Cedar Point, never, a day in your fucking life before, and I'm like, hey, do you remember that time that we went to Cedar Point? And you're like, I've never been there. And then I show you a photograph of Cedar Point. Doing that is going to do nothing for you. You're going to be like, okay, I was never there before, but you could, I guess, tell me that Cedar Point exists now. Now you can be like, oh yeah, there's Cedar Point. It exists. It's a thing that exists now because I've just shown you that Cedar Point exists. You don't have any personal knowledge of the fact that Cedar Point exists outside of me having shown you that Cedar Point exists. You were never there. There's nothing to refresh. I'm not refreshing your recollection. I'm simply feeding you a fucking answer. So that's essentially what the hell happened here, okay? So let's watch this clip and you guys will get a better understanding because, you know, my analogies may not always be perfect, okay? I'm always just giving you some random shit off the top of my head and it may not be the best analogy, but whatever. It should be pretty well explained at this point that to refresh a recollection, There has to be something to be refreshed. So you have to have some sort of baseline memory of something or knowledge of something in order for me to refresh your recollection about it. Otherwise, I'm just giving you an answer and I'm not refreshing your recollection. And that is exactly what Ryan Elsey did with Sarah Markle. So let us take a look here.
Are you familiar with when Jeffrey Herbstman was held in custody by the Detroit Police Department?
Yes.
And based on your role in the investigation, do you know the dates that he was held in custody?
Yes, the November 7th, and I believe he was released on the 10th.
And at around the time that Mr. Herbstman was held in custody and ultimately released, are you aware of whether the fact that a suspect was in custody and then released was publicly reported by the media?
It was.
And do you know the date of the first public reports that the suspect was released, as far as you know?
I thought it was on the following day, so he was, I believe, on the 10th.
I believe the objection to she's speculating. It doesn't sound like she really knows. She's guessing.
Only if you know.
If you looked at a Detroit News article, would that help refresh your recollection?
Objection, Your Honor. I mean,
Not being admitted as an exhibit.
Right, to refresh
your recollection with anything.
well, she never stated that she read it out the Detroit News, so he can show her an article with the date on there, and she says, yes, that's the date I heard, or that's the date that was reported. So she's not going on her own personal knowledge of what she remembers.
Anything can be used to refresh your recollection, counsel. Objection overruled. It's not being admitted as an exhibit. Don't show us the jury, please.
Obviously, without divulging the contents of that article, once you've had an opportunity to review it, let me know if that has refreshed your recollection as to the date of media reports surrounding the release of a suspect in this case.
Yes.
And what was the date?
That was November 11th, 2023.
Okay, and
Okay. You guys even saw the look she gave him, right? Like, when she didn't know the date, she's like, basically, feed it to me. Just give me the date. Like, that's not refreshing a recollection. So, while I can understand that the judge is like, anything can be used to refresh a recollection, but to use a specific thing, such as the Detroit News, there needs to be a basis. There needs to be a foundation laid that she's ever even seen this fucking article before. Otherwise, what the fuck are we, how are we refreshing it then? How do we have any basis to know that this is actually a valid thing that she's testifying to? But, you know, the reality of it is the majority of Sarah Markle's testimony was absolutely egregious. This woman is incredibly condescending. She lacks all decorum necessary to be on the stand as a professional in court. Quite frankly, that is very much my opinion. Brian Brown did a fantastic job cross-examining her because she was incredibly argumentative with him the entire time. She was acting as if she could not understand his questions. She was, and again, being argumentative is kind of what is expected of a person on cross-examination because, again, they're an adversary to the person that's questioning them. So I get it. But again, there is a level of professionalism that is usually displayed by professionals, although that was completely lacking in this trial, but usually there is a level of professionalism. This woman particularly had zero of that. She was arguing with Brian at every step, and it was kind of ironic, actually, because the majority of the arguing that she was doing and the condescending attitude that she consistently was like the sarcastic remarks that she was backfiring with him, were making her look bad. Like, she was attempting to try to make Brian look bad, but really she was the one looking bad. This woman has no ability to follow a logical, sequential thought, is how she came across to me. Like, there was many people that came across to me as this, she being one of them. So we will continue down this path. But again, this was a crutch that was given to the prosecution. And this is the basis of this is refreshing a recollection. So again, the takeaway from this is that To properly refresh a recollection of someone, there needs to be a foundation laid that they have the knowledge to begin with. You cannot otherwise refresh recollection because there's nothing for them to recollect. They never knew about it, so you can't use an external piece of anything to validate their recollection because they never had one to begin with. That's the major takeaway here. Another crutch given to the prosecution. That was a good objection that was made by the defense. It was overruled, and the prosecution was allowed to continue down their line of questioning with Sarah Markle regarding this newspaper article that she has obviously never fucking seen a day in her life up until that day that she was on trial. I don't know. Stay tuned. We have so much more left to go, so just stay tuned.